Kieran, I think it's important to read this statement again. It's such a big deal. I'm just going to read it again, if you don't mind. It says, "Tonight I'll be informing the National Cabinet that New South Wales will proceed to a more comprehensive shutdown of non-essential services. This will take place over the next 48 hours." So she's saying there, the Premier, that she's informing the National Cabinet. This is not a decision by Scott Morrison, this is a decision by New South Wales. Supermarkets, petrol stations, pharmacies, convenience stores, freight and logistics and home delivery will be among the many services that will remain open. I understand from a source media is included in this, so fortunately we'll remain open, Kieran. Schools will be open tomorrow, although I'll have more to say on this issue in the morning. I think we can expect a school closure this week, perhaps Tuesday, let's see. But I mean, why would you even raise it otherwise? Due update, New South Wales tomorrow morning. What's absolutely key here, I guess, is what services are allowed to remain open. I get a bit of comfort from the fact that in this statement from the Premier Gladys Berejiklian, she says the many services that will remain open. So that would suggest it's not a comprehensive shutdown. That would suggest that many services will still be able to remain open, but some unnecessary ones will be asked to shut. You know, pubs, clubs, restaurants, maybe retail stores. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah. Well, my sources out of the state governments are telling me that, Andrew, and I'll go to Tiki on this because I'm interested to get your thoughts, because at the moment, as Andrew points out, there is still a bit of doubt as to what essential, you know, when they're saying non-essential, how big that umbrella will be. What it does include, and we know for sure, it includes pubs, restaurants, bars, clubs, places where people will socialise. If you can do your business from home, I can't see why that would be affected. But those venues where people will gather in large numbers, they will be shut. And as for schools, as Andrew said, this Tuesday, according to the statement from Gladys Berejiklian, looks likely for schools to close in New South Wales. I can tell you from Victoria, I've heard they will shut regardless of what the position is of other states. So Victoria is heading to shutting down schools this week.
Yep. Well, if I was Gladys Berejiklian and I was shutting down schools next week, I would also be effectively shutting down Westfield, because that's where a lot of them will go, isn't it? So I think that discretionary, all the shops apart from the supermarkets, I think you'll see all these shops closed now, and we are just going to have the main shops which are really needed for the basic function of society. And I think this will send a really interesting message, Kieran, to what we mean by self-isolation. I mean, all these guys coming off the cruise ship, for example, they're all going into self-isolation. That's one thing if you've got COVID-19 and you go into self-isolation. Boy, do you do that, presumably. But if you just happen to be having hung around at some stage with someone who's got it, I mean, how serious is everybody? And I think there was a really interesting development in Christchurch in New Zealand. You think, well, that's splendid isolation, really, in many ways. They had their first case, was it the day before yesterday, off a flight. Now, what would the cost of it be to have said, right, that whole flight is actually just going to sit in the airport hotel for 14 days. We're not all going to go into the ether. Right? Because the cost to the economy would have been dramatically less, and then just to shut it all down. And I think this is the sort of thing that people are becoming more and more tuned into.
Tiki, Kieran, if I can just add, I've had federal sources told me that the Prime Minister is, quote, perfectly comfortable with Gladys's announcement, and they have talked about it. And that was what he was flagging at the presser in terms of the more draconian measures this morning. So the Prime Minister is comfortable with the decision by New South Wales to press ahead with this, I'm told.
Yeah, and that language, Ashley, was pretty clear as we played the comment from the Prime Minister, saying he said there would be more draconian measures at the state level. Maybe he would have liked to have had the meeting tonight before the announcements. But either way, the fact is, and this is something I think we all have to try and navigate as journalists, as consumers, whatever else, it's a fluid situation. It's a crisis. It's a pandemic. You're going to have jurisdictions move when they see fit. And obviously New South Wales saw fit to do it today. Victoria, we're going to get a statement this afternoon along the same lines. Basically, the two most populous states are moving for a more comprehensive closing down of normal business. Whether that is all business, how far this goes, remains to be seen in Victoria. As of New South Wales, Ash, the statement from the Premier says Supermarkets, petrol stations, pharmacies, convenience stores, freight, logistics, home delivery are among the many services that will remain open. I think basically what we can say at this point, that hospitality venues, bars, restaurants and pubs, they are the ones they're targeting with this, Ashley.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that release from the New South Wales Premier makes that pretty clear, and the reason is that we all can see where this is heading. We all have access to these graphs. Looking at the numbers here in Australia, looking at the cases worldwide, we are lucky in Australia that we are a few weeks behind places like China, like Italy, even the UK. We've seen more than 300,000 cases now worldwide. The first 100,000 cases took 3 months to get to that point. The second 100,000 took 12 days. The third 100,000 just took the last few days, 3 days, to get to that final 100,000 cases. So the speed of this thing is hard to wrap your head around. It's killed more than 13,000 people around the world, and we're seeing the worst case scenarios playing out. 793 deaths overnight in Italy alone, the highest recorded to date. Also, they recorded their highest number of new cases overnight. There were 546 deaths in one day in the Lombardy region in the north, one of the hardest hit regions in the world. In the UK, we're seeing Boris Johnson being very clear with British people that the NHS there is going to be overwhelmed. He's warning Britain is going to become Italy if people don't immediately follow social distancing measures. Again, we are lucky to be watching what's happening overseas and to take those measures seriously now. The US, California, New York, lockdown. 45 of 50 American states have closed their schools. In fact, I think it's over 100 countries have now closed all of their schools.